Hello, everybody, and good day to you all. Welcome to our webinar today, Electrifying Trucking. Today, our speakers will discuss the technology growing in electrifying trucking, the growing influence on the electric transportation industry, and the emergence of electric trucks in deliveries. My name is Simbiat Yusuf. I am the Member Relations Manager at Fourth. And before we start the panel today, we have a few updates from the Ford team. And our moderator today will be Mike Roth, who is the Executive Director at North American Council of Freight Efficiency. Hey, so fourth, we are on a mission to electrify transportation by bringing people together through our work in the focus areas of access to charging, access to cars, policy advocacy, partnerships, and access to emerging modes. The work we do would not be possible without the support of our members and sponsors. If you're interested in sponsorship opportunities for the webinar or membership, you can contact myself. My email is on the screen, and I look forward to chatting with you all about that opportunity. And as the roadmap conference is coming closer, the Mobility for All scholarship application is still open with applications due by Monday, April 18th. If you have any questions regarding the Mobility for All scholarship, please contact myself, or you can visit the roadmap website at roadmapforth.org. We also announced our program. So if you want a sneak preview of what's to come with the Roadmap Conference, go on to the roadmapfort.org website for more information. And now I will pass it over to Mike, who is our moderator today. Mike? Mike, you are muted. We can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to moderate this discussion with some real experts in the area of electric trucking, and we will have a focus on long haul trucking, and but we're really going to talk about all electric trucks. So, quickly on me, I lead the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, and we're the group that brought Run on Less Electric last year, and we're in the process of reporting on what we found in electric trucks that are operating out in the real world. Just today, little plug, we released a report on vans and step vans with respect to the use case for electrification. And in about a month, we will release a similar report on heavy duty regional haul trucks. You know, what's the use case and what did we learn around electric trucks? So, again, really excited for the time today. Each of our speakers, Dawn, and then we'll have Salim and Ian will each make a presentation, and then we'll together answer your questions that you submit via the chat. So we'll start with you, Dawn. Dawn's the Vice President for Government Relations and Public Affairs at Volvo Group North America. She's been with Volvo Group for about 10 years and has responsibility for federal government relations as well as California policies. We also have Salim, and he is the CEO and co-founder of WattEV, and they have a mission to speed up the transition of U.S. trucking transport into zero emissions faster than anyone can expect. So very interesting to hear from Salim. And then finally, we'll hear from Ian Beil. Ian's a senior grid edge engineer with Portland General Electric, and he will share some thoughts on the electric island that they put in place. But his work focuses on incorporating energy storage and electric vehicle technologies into the power system. So with that, Dawn, really excited to have you here. I got a little icebreaker question for all of us. Mine for you to start with, Dawn, is, what were you thinking about electric trucks maybe 2 or 3 years ago? Go back 2018, 19. What was on your mind with respect to electric trucks?
Well, actually, if you go back only 2 or 3 years, we were very excited that electric trucks were coming on the market because we were at the beginning of our Volvo Lights project, which is ongoing in Southern California. That project it's hard to believe it's 3 years old now. But and then of course the work for that began even before then. But it is so. While we knew we'd be moving down this path, I will say that it is moving faster than we had originally anticipated, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, very good. And Salim, what go back a few years. What was your thought around electric trucks back then?
Well, 2 years ago, I don't even think WattEV existed. I mean, we're a company that was established in late 2020. But it's very exciting to see all the progress being made on electrifying the transport industry, and we're excited to be here and be at the forefront of this transition.
Yeah, very cool. And Ian, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And sorry, I'm still having trouble getting the video working on my computer. But yeah, good to be here, and I kind of just here to provide the utility perspective on all this, new electric load that's coming onto the grid, how we can work with fleet owners and operators to help encourage them to electrify their fleets, and also trying to work with them on costs and projecting out load, well into the future, so that we're not surprised on the utility side, and customers aren't, surprised with bills down the road. Glad to be here.
So what's your, how would you respond to what you were thinking about 2 or 3 years ago on electric trucks?
Yeah, I don't know that we were thinking a whole lot about trucking, especially, that seemed really far down the road. So it's pretty exciting to see how far it's come in such a short time period.
Yeah, very good. And heck, I'll answer the question while I asked it. I've been in trucking 35 years, so a little longer than Salim, you might have been. So, I don't get too surprised about things. But, 2 or 3 years ago, NACFE was doing work on electric trucks, and I would have said, yeah, to little trucks, vans, step vans. But the question would have been really questionable after that for medium-duty box trucks or electrification into regional haul and even maybe long haul. So, I have, really come around to, these are simple.
Hi, Mike. I think we lost your audio there. Mike, we still can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I think maybe while Mike is reconnecting, Dawn, do you want to go ahead and jump into your slides?
Sure, happy to do so. Let me just try and move. There we go. So yes, thank you very much for having me with you today. And I wanted to share a little bit about Volvo Group's experience with electric trucks. So I'll start with just a quick 1 minute overview. I'm sorry, my slides don't seem to be advancing. There we go. So I think most people know who Volvo is, or they think they do, but the one distinction I always make is that we are separate from Volvo Cars. That is a completely separate company. We are fully on the heavy duty side, but you can see here that we are mostly an East Coast based company. We manufacture heavy duty trucks, buses, construction equipment, and engines for both marine vessels as well as loose industrial engines. Have about 17,000 employees in the US. And the United States is, and North America more broadly, it's the biggest market that Volvo has globally. So it's a very important market. And we're very proud of the fact that we manufacture all of our trucks for North America in the United States. So moving forward, let's see, seems to be a delay here. There we go. So Volvo Group is very, very excited about this entry to zero emission vehicles and battery electric vehicles in particular at this moment. Back in 2020, we set a goal of realizing that, well, we've always been supportive of the Paris Accord, recognizing that transportation has a large role to play in the climate change issue, and wanting to be part of the solution. And so we set a goal back in 2020 that we were going to have 100% of our products be fossil free by 2040. And we set an interim goal that 35% of our vehicles would be electric by 2030. Now, right now, the focus is really more on battery electric vehicles, but we are also very strongly committed to fuel cell vehicles and see those coming in to the marketplace here in North America in the second half of this decade. There we go. So just to give you a visual of what this looks like for us, you can see here from 2020 where we were really at 100% of a combustion and natural gas engines, and that trajectory going down for the combustion engine, and seeing more battery electrics and then more fuel cell electrics coming into the marketplace till we get about just before 2020, where you'll see that line goes down quite low, but it doesn't go all the way to the x-axis, and that is because we believe that there will be certain applications where a combustion engine will still be needed, but that can still be fossil free with renewable fuels. So this is really our goal and what we're striving for in the coming years, and very excited about it that we are working positively along that trajectory so far. A lot of where we are today comes from the Volvo Lights project that I mentioned earlier on when I was talking to Mike in the introduction. The Volvo Lights project started over 3 years ago in Southern California, and it really began the process to get us to where we are today. It brought more than 25 battery electric Class 8 vehicles operating in the Inland Empire, and with trucks moving freight from the ports of LA and Long Beach into inland to that region. We've had great success. The project is wrapping up shortly within the next couple of months. But that whole effort has led us to where we are today, which you can see back in 2020, we actually had the commercial launch of our first Class 8 electric vehicle. And just earlier this year, we announced the second generation of that product. And that product has an increase in range and capacity that is really important, as we're finding that what customers need to be able to use these vehicles. We have a diverse fleet or diverse set of fleets operating these vehicles, mostly in Southern California. But I mentioned here that our first East Coast delivery was to Manhattan Beer in New York City. And so we are beginning to see these vehicles being used in different types of applications and in different parts of the country. In fact, we're very pleased to just announce our largest order globally for electric trucks within the last couple of weeks to Performance Team, an order of 110 electric vehicles. Now, while that's on the Volvo truck side, I just want to mention that certainly with Mack trucks, we have another application available, which is a refuse truck. And that is also currently in commercial operation in New York City Sanitation Department. And also some trucks have been working with Republic Services in North Carolina. So again, lots of applications where these are beginning to roll out. So we're very excited to see this progress continue. But I did want to take a moment to also just provide some caution that despite these great steps forward, we are finding some headwinds. And probably the single largest headwind we have is the availability of charging infrastructure and having and various aspects of charging infrastructure. And of course, you're going to hear more about that from the other panelists today. But our concern is in terms of the actual availability of it, the cost of it, the time it takes for it to be installed. This is something that our fleets are having to learn more about, and that we are that the Volvo Lights fleets had to experience as part of this project, some challenges with that. In addition, there's a concern about the TCO being there for fleets. Yes, there are some incentives available in the marketplace, and particularly in California, but that is not the case around the country. And while there are several studies that say that the TCO should be in place within a year or two, a couple of years, I think that's a bit quick. I'm not sure that it will be there quite that fast. Certainly, we hope so, but time will tell. In terms of the what fleets need, we think that it's really important for, and it's not just fleets actually, but all the stakeholders in this process to really focus on having a dedicated source and point of contact. And that's probably a common issue across the board, because this gets really complex. There's a lot of new partners in this field, a lot of new stakeholders engaged, and many of whom are not used to dealing with transportation issues. Certainly utilities, it's newer for them. Local government and county governments that have to issue permits for things that they haven't had to do before. So a lot of things on the learning curve there. So with that, I know we want to leave time for questions. So I'll stop and look forward to hearing questions from the audience.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And next we'll hear from Salim from WattEV. Salim, can you join me on stage?
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here, and happy to share with you what WattEV has been working on over the past 2 years. So I think at this point, it's really, everybody knows that the transition to electric is coming, and it's really not a matter of if, but when that transition will happen. I think from Mike's, roadshow on Run on Less, and one of the biggest takeaways was that these trucks that are currently operating are mostly operating on a return to home basis, meaning that the charging stations are at their users' headquarters. Those trucks are out running, maybe 65 to 100 miles a day maximum, and then charging at home. But really, in order to get to long haul freight or beyond, the short mile, we need to have an infrastructure in place and the trucks on the road to make them affordable and accessible to all. And that's where WattEV comes in, with the vision of really accelerating the transition to electric heavy-duty trucking. So what is it exactly that we do? Well, WattEV is building out the infrastructure of publicly available charging stations, wherever possible, utilizing solar to bring down the cost of utilities, and having battery storage for peak shaving. So all of our charging stations will have both CCS and MCS chargers. For those of you that don't know, MCS is the megawatt charging standards that allows for rapid charging. And then on the trucking side of things, well, while we were building out the infrastructure, we quickly realized that it's not enough to just build infrastructure and expect the demand to pick up naturally. That's when we really started looking at the trucks that are available on the market today, and how we can make them more affordable and accessible to owner-operators, carriers, and anyone looking to get into electrifying their fleets. Obviously, none of this can be done without the software that comes together. So we also have the entire software platform that connects the entire ecosystem together to bring both the infrastructure and the trucks to remove all the unknowns from the equation, and make electric trucking affordable and accessible to all. On this map, you can see the 3 locations that we currently have in development. There's one in Bakersfield, one in the Inland Empire in San Bernardino area, and another one next to the ports. These 3 sites are currently under construction, with the plans to be operational by the end of this year. And as some of you have noticed, we have a purchase for 50 Volvos that we expect to get by the end of this year. So why are we starting with the Inland Empire in Southern California? Well, as you know, this is one of the major traffic to corridors for trucks. There's a lot of freight coming from the port area to Inland Empire as well as to Shafter. But these three sites that we have in construction are within the radius of the range of these vehicles, which is about 250 to 275 miles at full weight. And this allows us to demonstrate that trucks can be used beyond their return to base operations and to go well into different areas. And some of our sites having obviously solar. So this is our Bakersfield site, which is a 115-acre property, of which 100 acres of that is going to be dedicated all to solar, which equates to about 40 megawatts of peak solar and 40 megawatt hours of battery storage. At full scale, this site will be able to charge 200 trucks per day, which is still only a fraction of the total trucking industry. But by having the site operational, we can start expanding the range of these trucks beyond the short haul or the middle mile to long freight. You will be relying on the charging infrastructure as well as the WattEV truck as a service relay model that we have. This is our San Bernardino location, which is also very close to a lot of the Inland Empire distribution centers. This site will also have most of the power coming from utilities. So obviously, a lot of the locations that we're at may not be suitable for solar because we won't be able to find properties of size everywhere we go. So in those situations, we're relying mostly on the utilities to provide the power, as well as having battery storage for peak shaving to bring down the cost of utilities and demand charges. So how exactly does the truck as a service model work? Well, at all of our sites, we will have a certain number of assets, these trucks located, that are available to owner-operators and carriers to book through our platform. So for instance, if there is a user in Bakersfield that picks up one of our trucks at our depot and is doing a load for one of the distribution centers in that area, for instance, going from Bakersfield to San Bernardino, at the time that they get to San Bernardino, that truck is nearly out of range, at which point they can go to our San Bernardino depot, drop off a truck, and pick up a fully charged truck to return to Bakersfield area where they started. So using this relay concept, we're able to go beyond the current constraints of those vehicles to expand the range and minimize that for downtime, so they're no longer waiting for 2 to 3 hours for them to charge. But how exactly do we go from that to long haul freight? So really, it starts with a combination of many different things. One being the charging infrastructure. So as mentioned earlier, all of our charging infrastructure is publicly accessible, and we'll have our own trucks as well as any operators or carriers that have their own fleet to come and charge at our depots. And using our truck as a service model with the relay operation, we're able to expand the range of the vehicles, reduce the charge time for the drivers, so that they have a fully charged truck on the other end ready to go. But then you run into the issue of scalability. How do you go from that to rapid scale up to a nationwide network of charging? And that's where MCS comes in. So with megawatt charging, the goal is to go towards the 160 kilowatt charging constraint to megawatt levels, which then changes the charge time from a 2 to 3 hour charge time down to about 30 to 45 minute charge time. At this point, you'll be able to get much better utilization of all of the assets and be able to expand your fleet beyond the middle mile towards long haul freight. So with a combination of the relay model with the current generation trucks and with the direction of MCS technology run by Charin, we're able to really rapidly scale up beyond what we see today towards long haul freight. In terms of our expansion plan, we have, so as mentioned, we have 3 sites that are currently in operation, but we have a network of sites that are already in the pipeline, taking us all the way from the Southern California region up to Northern California to create a completely zero emissions corridor utilizing our relay model. And all of our sites will have the ability to upgrade towards MCS when that technology becomes available towards the end of next year. In terms of the capability and of the MCS product, on the trucking side of things, we do see some of the organizations starting to evaluate that and put the technology into use. We anticipate seeing MCS trucks and charging depots coming online towards the end of 2024-2025 timeframe. But by having all of the network in place now, we can quickly scale up and expand to a much faster than anticipated by already having the power from the solar and the utilities in place. So in summary, the WattEV model allows us to have long-haul trucking freight available to us today using the relay model and our charging network. But in order to grow nationwide much more rapidly, with the availability of MCS products, we can scale up and go faster towards long-haul trucking. So happy to be here today and looking forward to the questions after the panel. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Salim. And now we will have Ian. Ian is joining us by phone, so you won't see the presenter. You won't be looking at me either, but you'll be seeing his slide presentation. Ian?
Thanks, Cynthia. Good to be here. Thanks for having me. Wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the utility side of all this fleet electrification and how we can kind of help our customers and how our customers can help utilities plan and prepare for the new loads that we're likely to be seeing on our system. If you can go to the next slide, please. So when we have these conversations with our customers, the main thing that we really like to focus on and really hammer home is that like the lower and slower you charge your EV, the better it's going to be both from the impact on the utility side and the impact to the customer's bill. The more power and energy requirements that we can push into off-peak overnight hours and prevent, really high peak loads on the system is just going to, reduce the stress we see on the infrastructure. It's going to reduce the additional infrastructure we need to build out, and that's going to translate to cheaper rates for any customer who's looking to electrify, both passenger vehicles, but especially for these medium and heavy duty vehicle applications. Now that being said, we do understand that, time is money, and there are certain transportation applications where, really higher level powers, maybe 300 kilowatts, maybe these, megawatt plus chargers that Salim already mentioned with the MCS architecture that's coming out. There may be times when those are going to be necessary, right? And so from the utility side, we understand that, and what we really ask our customers is to have those conversations early and often with the utility, because these things just take time to build out, take time to permit, take time to plan. And the sooner we can get those into our models, the sooner we can act and help facilitate, getting this infrastructure in the ground. If you go to the next slide, please. Now, besides just the electrical requirements that these fleets are going to have, there's also just like the physical constraints, right? So, I mean, it's obvious when you have fixtures like this, but a lot of the existing EV infrastructure, even if it's higher power electrically, is just not physically built to handle, a Class 8 truck. It just, there's not a good way to pull in and pull out. You end up blocking multiple spaces. And this goes for even like school buses as well, right? So just a lot of bigger vehicles, the electrical infrastructure in place is often not really designed with those in mind. And that's something that we all need to work on to help facilitate and change these practices so that we can get these medium and heavy duty vehicles near chargers, easily and efficiently. Next slide, please. So with that in mind, PGE was really lucky. We have Daimler Truck North America, who's actually headquartered right here in Portland. And so we had some conversations with them back in 2019. And that led to the idea of this electric island facility. So it's a joint project between both companies where you can see there's room here for several large Class 8 vehicles to park in parallel. Sorry, one sec. Is that better? Okay. Have a chance to park these vehicles in parallel and just give us on the utility side a chance to look at, what kind of electrical infrastructure is required in this situation. and what is the time that it takes to build something like that? What's a good design for the overall site? All these kind of little things that you might not initially think about when you're designing a site like that. So if you go to the next slide. So here we're showing like what the site looked like in 2019. Hadn't really built anything like this previously. Daimler hadn't built anything like this previously, and so it was kind of the classic, well, let's just put something on a napkin, put something on a whiteboard. But we eventually got to a point where we had engineered drawings by 2020. And you can see here that a big emphasis on the site design. This is only about 1 acre per scale. So a lot smaller than the projects that Salim is working on. But for an initial demo, it is able to take the full trailer swing of a Class 8 truck, and up to 4 of them can park in parallel there. So for an acre lot, we felt that was a pretty good size, pretty good amount of vehicles to accommodate in one space. If you can go forward 1 slide. And so then in 2021, so the site we broke ground, let's see, October 2020, the site was energized April 2021, so about 7 months for complete construction. And you can see the site obviously looks pretty similar to the engineered drawings on the previous page there. Some specifics that might be of interest: we have a couple of transformers for a total capacity of around 2 megawatts today. All the rest of the infrastructure and the site is built to handle up to 5 megawatts total. And so we actually have plans to replace those transformers with bigger ones once additional load comes online. We have a fenced off space in the top of the diagram there where the actual rectifiers are located. And those are what take the AC power from the utility side and convert it to DC power for the chargers. And then there's this, what we call a precast concrete trench. So we can actually lift up these portions of the trenchway in order to access the cableway underneath. And that allows us to quickly install additional chargers out there, which we do pretty regularly. The site's designed for interoperability testing, where a vehicle can come up and, Daimler likes to use it to test, okay, does our truck talk to charger A and B and C and D? Because that handshake, as they call it, doesn't always go smoothly. And we have other customers in the area. So like our local transit authority, TriMet, occasionally uses the site to test their buses in the same manner, and other customers as well. So the concrete trench is really nice for that kind of quick swapping or quick install without having to jackhammer up the asphalt every time you want to do that. And then the actual dispensers, there's 8 currently installed. There's room for a total of 15. So again, only 4 trucks can park in parallel, but we can test quite a number out there. And I think Salim had already mentioned the MCS, the megawatt charging standard architectures, and we're hoping to get a few of those once they become commercially available on the site. Hopefully as soon as some point in 2023. It's kind of up to the vendors, but we have all the kind of back end utility capacity already built out, which is one really nice thing about this facility. If you go to the next slide. And I'd like to show this slide just to kind of highlight that, hey, this is like a big construction project. There's a ton of conduit in the ground, a ton of conductor being pulled. When you are talking about power capacities this big, it really is a pretty big endeavor. And so, we really wanted to future-proof the site and make sure it had all this capacity up front so that we didn't have to go back and do a whole lot of construction down the road. But that comes at a cost, right? And so having those conversations again with customers around, well, what is the amount of charging capacity you really need? Are there ways we can reduce that either by shifting your load to off-peak hours? Maybe we can talk about putting batteries on site. There's a number of different ways we can tackle that challenge. But at the end of the day, there probably are going to be sites like this throughout, major highway areas, major industrial areas throughout the country where we need a lot of power, we need a lot of load, and we're going to have to build out a lot of infrastructure to support that. And the next slide, please. And the last thing I wanted to mention is just that, PGE, like all utilities and a lot of other stakeholders, is really interested in, with the new infrastructure funds coming, how do we use that to deploy sites like this? Where does it make sense to space those sites out? Can we put it in locations that aren't going to exacerbate existing problems on the grid? There are certainly some areas that just tend to have more available capacity than others, just kind of randomly in terms of, well, this feeder's a lot more lightly loaded than this other one. So yeah, just the more we can have those conversations and get the kind of early planning done so that we can have shovel-ready projects ready to go and bid on some of this funding that's coming, the better off I think we're all going to be. And the last pitch I'll just make is that we do tours out at Electric Island all the time. So if anyone's ever interested, I'm happy to either have myself or one of my colleagues at Daimler, host you out there for like a site tour. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Yeah, very good. So really fascinating discussions, and I've been watching the chat and looking at the questions that are coming in, and so the rest of our time we're gonna dig through and into some of those questions. I mean, two of them I'll try to answer right off the bat, and then maybe turn it over to some others. And the first one has to do with return to base operations. And, all these discussions typically end up going quickly to, well, trucks, heavy duty trucks are 500 miles a day, and the drivers sleep in them. So they're disparate routes. They're all over the country. And yes, that is a part of the trucking, but I'm even surprised at how many trucks return to base and how lower miles that they operate. So Dawn mentioned it. I mean, there's beverage and grocery and the like where, some of these heavy tractors only do 75, 100 or less than 200 miles. And some of the customers that are ordering these early electric trucks, another thing that people are surprised about, 50% or really maybe 45 to 50%, depending on the month, of tractors built for over the road are day cabs and not sleepers. So just by definition, you have to get the driver home in a day cab. A few day cab operated trucks will stop at a hotel for the driver overnight. But, there are a lot of trucks out there that return to base. And we do need to solve this fast, truck stop, charging. The second thing that was question was how quickly does it take to swap freight? That came in while I think, Salim, you were talking about it, and maybe I'll give a quick answer, and then you can add to it. But North American freight movement was built on what we call drop and hook, and it is the fact that the trailer can be dropped in literally minutes. I've seen drivers, back into a spot, put the landing gear down, pull away in 7-8 minutes, and then they can go grab another trailer. So if the goods can stay in the trailer, that swapping of freight, or rather a tractor and a trailer dropping one trailer, hooking up to another trailer, and getting out on the road can be really quick. And really, Salim, that's kind of, I'll turn it over to you to sort of help answer that question, but that's sort of one of them.
Yep, I think you got it exactly right. I was actually at the port one day timing how long it would take, and it took less than 2 minutes to just attach to another trailer and get out of it. So the drop and hook concept is fairly quick, and it could be very efficient. Yeah, and as you mentioned, the majority of the freight, they are return to base operations. But I think in one of your own articles, you mentioned that of all the people you used, there was only one, being Biaggi Brothers, that actually used electric trucks equivalent to what their day-to-day operations were. But all of the other operators had adapted to figure out how to adapt their model to focus on using electric trucks.
Yeah. So let's kick it off with one question. I'll start with Dawn, and then if either of the other of you. So, it appears like in particularly heavy tractors that there's some work to do to get total cost of ownership to equal, the internal combustion engine. So there's a big upfront cost to the charging, upfront cost to the truck, savings on the fuel, savings on some maintenance. But, where do you see, Dawn, the big opportunities to improve TCO, in the short term or short and medium term?
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. It's actually not so much not an easy question to answer. I mean, in one sense, you can say, one of the obvious places is just battery costs. I mean, the cost of batteries is such a large percentage of the overall vehicle cost, and so as that comes down, certainly that's going to affect the initial price for these vehicles. But there's so many unknowns out there. I mean, the trucks haven't been around and operating that long for us to really know what the residual prices are going to be. And a lot of fleets, depend on being able to turn their trucks over after a few years, and they don't know how to calculate that yet. Something that one of the previous speakers talked about was I think it was Ian, on the charging rates, and it's much cheaper to charge more slowly than it is, at faster speeds. And so there's a lot of unknowns in terms of what utility rates people are going to pay. I can tell you that for just the example of the Volvo Lights project, our fleets were paying, not only you had 3 different rates throughout different parts of the day, depending on whether it was a peak time or not, but then you had winter rates versus summer rates, and then you think about a fleet that might have different locations that might be different utilities. And so do all utilities, some might have demand charge rates, others might not. So really the fueling costs are quite unknown now. There's also there's a belief that costs for maintenance will be lower than diesel trucks, but again, we will have to see. I think we believe that to be the case, but until we actually have some more experience with these vehicles on the road, it really is hard to say.
Salim or Ian, you want to talk about TCO levers?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that these trucks are expensive, but we have to look at what makes up the total cost of ownership. So on a diesel operation, you have the leasing or the financing of the vehicle, you have the registration and insurance, maintenance, and the most expensive one being the fuel. So these are the costs that make up the truck, not including the driver. On the electric side, the asset is obviously more expensive, but the maintenance, we imagine, will go down, insurance will go down, and then the fuel cost, being the energy, is also less. But how do you make up that difference? And that's where it really comes down to utilizing that asset as much as possible. If an asset is only used in the short haul freight where it's only driven 60 miles, it's very difficult to justify using that cost of an asset where most owner operators are using secondhand trucks that cost 60K. So that's where really expanding the range beyond short haul towards long haul and getting maximum utilization makes sense. So with WattEV, what we're trying to do is really create a scenario where we get 300 or more miles out of these trucks per day. And that comes back to, okay, if you do 300 miles per truck per day, you have to, these trucks have to charge. But you don't want the driver sitting there 2 to 3 hours for that vehicle to charge. And that's where that depot model where they can come in and swap trucks makes sense. And then by managing the assets, it really becomes an optimization problem on how you can shift the windows around so that it can pick up a load, have a truck ready for them on the other end to get into a fully charged truck, and then another driver is doing that same sort of pattern, but in reverse. So really by shifting those windows, we can maximize the utilization of those vehicles to bring down the total cost of ownership to something that's at par with diesel.
Salim, there's a quick question that come flying in about why do insurance costs go down? You mentioned that.
Sure. So we imagine insurance costs going down because most of the trucks that we have on order are going to come with a suite of technology that prevents any accident. So there's the telematics that are in there. There's all sorts of cameras and radars and everything. Not to mention all the work that's being done by other companies towards automation of these vehicles. But long term, we imagine that the insurance will come down because there's less moving parts, there's less maintenance, there's less accidents that come from all this technology that is being baked into these assets.
Yeah, okay. And some of those technologies can be bundled or unbundled from electric trucks, depending on how you look at it. Ian, there's a question about the site size of electric charging sites. And maybe we can, I want to bring up hydrogen here as a range extender for an electric truck. So Dawn and Ian, you might want to start thinking about hydrogen. But for you, Ian, have you compared, like a site fueling island, like a diesel fueling island for 4 trucks, like you have at the island there in Portland, compared sort of the size? And I'm guessing the time to charge with that MCS you were mentioning will be really critical to the size and throughput. Can you talk through that a little bit, and have you compared it to diesel?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say at the Electric Island site specifically, that's, like I mentioned, 1 acre. It'd be reasonable, I think, to say that the electrical infrastructure that we build out, so the top part of that picture, could support, say, 10 trucks. So it's 5 megawatts of capacity. You think about 10 trucks charging at 500 kilowatts max, that would get you, pretty reasonable refueling times using like the lower end of the MCS standard. Now we couldn't probably fit 10 trucks in parallel in that 1 acre spot, but it is pretty close, comparably. If you're talking about, the electrical infrastructure is kind of off to the side versus gas fueling, that infrastructure is largely kind of right next to the truck. But the total spatial profile, especially once you move beyond just a single truck, if you're scaling this to 5 or 10 trucks, tends to be pretty comparable. Now, that's with these early designs we've done. As we get into more value engineering, it's possible, there will be kind of slicker ways of doing it than we did with this first site here.
Excellent, very good. So, let's get in. I mean, the topic of this webinar was long haul trucking and electrifying long haul trucking, and our work at NACFE, we've seen, we call hydrogen fuel cell, an extended range electric truck, because there is a lot of commonality between an electric truck, battery electric truck, and a hydrogen fuel cell truck, and we definitely see both winning. But let's talk through it, Dawn, maybe to start, maybe Salim, or how are fleets viewing hydrogen fuel cell trucks vis-a-vis electric trucks as we get into either shorter or longer range?
Right. Well, I can say that Volvo, and this, I mentioned this earlier in showing my slides, that Volvo is very committed to the fuel cell, trucks as well. And we anticipate having some in the marketplace in the second half of this decade. We have, consciously made a decision to focus first more on the battery electric vehicles. But I think when you're getting to that point of long haul, that's really where you're going to see greater use of fuel cell vehicles. I mean, we, together with Daimler, have formed a joint venture called Cellcentric that is actually working on the development of working on this fuel cell technology. The challenge is the fueling infrastructure, of course, and I think there's probably there was a greater head start with the electric charging infrastructure, just because of the experience that we've had with light duty vehicles, and so that's why naturally that has taken off more quickly than the fuel cell vehicles, but they're coming too.
Yeah, and I think that from an infrastructure standpoint, we're definitely going to have to build out electrification for passenger car batteries, electric vehicles, as well as some of these lighter duties. I mentioned vans and step vans earlier, so it'll be 2 infrastructures we'll be building out, I think. Salim, in your business model, I'm sure you've looked at hydrogen fuel cells and electric, and any comments on the topic?
Yeah, actually, before we founded WattEV, we were sort of in the research phase evaluating hydrogen. And we took it to a point where we almost had a property in construction for having a solar field powering a electrolyzer to create green hydrogen. But the issue we ran into is the economics. It's much more costly to create green hydrogen than it is to use steam methane reforming, which is the traditional way that hydrogen is made. And then you look at the transportation and the storage of hydrogen, it becomes extremely inefficient. And that's when we really started looking at the electric trucks and saw that with the use of MCS, the charge rates are going down. And with the technology going into the batteries, that you can get higher density batteries. So those benefits that hydrogen offered in terms of faster fuel times and lighter weight won't necessarily be the case in the future. And that's where really in order to have electrification meet long haul freight, you have to have more sites in shorter distances so that you can have rapid charging at each of those locations, and that's how you would get the long haul freight. That being said, though, I think it still is necessary for multiple technologies to be evaluated in this process. I mean, a lot of people are still in the evaluation and testing phase to see what wins. But for us, we think that with the use of MCS, we can make long haul trucking work.
Very good. Okay. One of the as we were talking about swapping trailers, a couple of questions came flying in around swapping batteries. So, there's the battery pack and a size for the range, and then there's the, charging along the shift of the truck driver, et cetera, maybe an opportunity charge or en route charging, corridor charging, some people call it. But what about the idea of swapping battery packs on the truck to keep the rest of the truck running with a full state of charge and not having battery charge, not having to charge it, on that truck? Any thoughts on that from any of the three of you?
Yeah, I'll just say that that is not something that, I mean, certainly we've talked about it and looked at it. I don't think it's something that we believe is going to be, you know, a viable solution. I mean, there's a number of reasons why. Everything from the time and effort of just physically swapping the batteries, but also then you're using other batteries. You don't know how what is the quality of them. How much have they been used to? Have they been charging at a high speed or at a lower speed? There's just a lot of uncertainty there, and so I don't think that's a model that we're going to see going forward.
Yeah, and just to feed off of that, we've looked into it as well, and these batteries are pretty heavy. Not to mention all of the cabling that goes into the cooling and the wiring of these batteries. And then on top of that, you have the legal aspect of it, right? So if I buy a truck, I want to know what the warranty is on that battery. If I'm swapping batteries, how do I know if that warranty will now follow on the truck? So there's all sorts of reasons why we don't think that will be, something that will happen anytime soon on the trucking side of things.
Yeah. Ian, I have a question for you, and that is around cost of this infrastructure. And I know, we only have a few build outs, so it's kind of difficult to estimate costs. But, for these sort of depot-based charging, the charging expense will likely fall to either the truck owner or the site owner. But then you go to the other end of the spectrum, past the WattEV model, where you've got some sort of public charging, which would be potentially truck stop companies getting involved in charging trucks. I mean, Ian, what can you help us think through that whole scenario and maybe look at and then follow up with who's going to pay for it?
Yeah, great question. So like Dawn had mentioned, utility rate structures and how those are going to evolve in the face of additional medium and heavy duty EV charging, especially. One thing I really want to highlight is that a lot of utilities, including PGE, either have programs that are in place or are very much in the process of getting these in place where we can come to the customer and help with the cost and the actual design and construction of this infrastructure, and actually put in, either just upfront capital, which we kind of make back in, the electricity rates we're charging, or, potentially with like grants and other infrastructure funding opportunities. So for instance, PGE has a program called Fleet Partner where we'll come out to your site, we'll help design the site for you for free. So you'll probably want this many chargers at this power level. And then if you elect, PG can actually be kind of an EPC general contractor and hire some consultants that will, come in and, work with the construction crews and actually build out that make-ready infrastructure for our customers. And that, again, is something that's starting to crop up at a lot of places around the country. So being able to take advantage of those programs, I think, is going to be a really important step for those who are looking to fund this, because it is capital intensive. It is a lot of upfront costs associated with that. I don't know if Dawn or if you got anything to add there.
Not really.
Yeah, so I'm going to start to close this out, and I'm going to ask one question for each of you to answer. You can fight over who goes first or last. I really don't care, but the question is around, my 35 years in trucking. We've been pretty short term focused. It's how do we get goods moved? How do we buy trucks this year? Thinking a little about next year or the following year, but no joking aside, a long range plan at a fleet or even a truck builder, was in the months, not years or decades. And here we sit talking about, 2030, 2040, 2050. So the whole industry is thinking about, the longer term future while actually working in the short term. And I actually think that it's kind of hard for us to figure out all of that. So my question to end this webinar is, for each of you, how do we act today around electrifying trucking, including hydrogen fuel cells, and also work on the longer term future? So what maybe is the low hanging fruit, yet things we got to work on for the longer term as well in this area? So whoever wants to go first, but you all have to answer.
Well, I'm certainly happy to go first. In terms of looking at the long range, I mean, we actually are doing that and have been doing that for a while. That's why we have, trucks that are already on the road and have already come to our second generation truck. And but yeah, obviously there's a much longer term until, to get to 2040, where we're hoping to have the majority or all of our vehicles be ZEVs. And I would say something about not so much for us, but because our big concern moving forward is not about our capabilities in the technology, but rather the unique partnerships that have to be formed. It's no longer just in Volvo's hands to make this work. And so I think what's really important is to try and facilitate the ability for partners to work together. And that is not only even across different stakeholders, but even within a certain stakeholder, like governmental entities. If governments want to accelerate ZEVs in the marketplace, so let's pick at a state level, there's things that they can do. They can exempt taxes, state taxes to help improve the TCO. They can make sure that they have their different agencies, like in California, where you've got CARB that's doing incentive for vehicles, and you've got CEC doing incentives for infrastructure. You've got different permitting authorities, making sure that they're all on board and they're coordinating, their efforts. So I would, to give time to others, I'll just stop there. But I think the thing that we can do longer term is just starting to get all the people to be working together.
Yeah, very good, Dawn. Thank you.
Yeah, for us, I mean, I was at the Coalition of Clean Air in Sacramento a few weeks ago, and they were saying that for the past 30 years, they've been talking about doing something like this forever. And now they see WattEV, that we're actually here today building something and making it a reality. And really, that's what it takes. I mean, as Dawn mentioned, we need multiple parties to all put their hands together and figure out how to solve this. On the, there's the incentive side, there's the California grants, there's the federal grants. Utilities each have their own incentives to push for electrification. But really, this isn't a one-man job to solve this problem. It really takes an effort from everybody to make electrification in the transport industry a reality.
And Ian?
Yeah, and just to add to both of those, I totally agree. It is really getting all these stakeholders on the same page and kind of working together, and getting to a world where, range anxiety is getting reduced in a lot of applications, at least on the passenger vehicle side, as these batteries become, higher and higher power density and energy density. And, we still have significant range anxiety for these, for instance, like the long haul fleets. But as we're able to reduce that, the technology involves, really it does become more of a charger availability anxiety problem. And so that's up to us as utilities, and working again with stakeholders at the national and state level, and working with manufacturers to make sure that we do have truck stops, electric truck stops every 50 miles or whatever it's going to be, and there's going to be available charger when you pull up your rig, and you're not going to be waiting 8 hours to charge your vehicle. And, that infrastructure isn't going to come up overnight, and it's going to take a lot of conversations early and often now to really get that in the ground.
Thank you all so much for joining us. We're just after the hour, so to respect everyone's time, thank you so much, Mike, for leading and moderating the panel. Salim, Dawn, and Ian, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with our attendees today. We'll be sending a webinar recap shortly after this presentation, which will have the presentation, the recording, as well as slide decks from our presenters and some additional resources. If we didn't get to your question today, don't worry. We'll be able to connect offline. But we just want to say thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you on Tuesday, April 26th, for the next webinar in our schedule, Clean Transportation for All, Access to EV Charging. Thank you again, and we hope to see you all soon. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.